There are no petitions. We move on to General Manager's report, and I put agenda item GMR 19/005, Draft Code of Meeting Practice. Can I have mover and seconder, please, councillors? Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Councillors, are there any questions or debate? Councillor Constable.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment to the recommendation. And the recommendation reads that Council endorse the draft code of meeting practice. I would like to change the word endorse to submit the draft code of meeting practice for a period of no than 42 days. It might be semantic to some, but what that is indicating, in my thinking, is taking on board the submissions and not closing off the ability and the consideration for modification to this code. We've heard today some very passionate speakers, some of them overly passionate, in bringing their thoughts to bear on this. So just that subtle change indicates we're not ramming it down the community's throat. We are actually seeking constructively their submissions, and we're not closing off this to any modification by way of submissions. Thank you. I'll call for a seconder for that amendment.
You don't need to put your hand up, Mr. Councillor McGinley. I will come straight back to you. I'm just going to get some clarity. Before I seek the mover and seconder's agreement, if it was to change just that word council submit, for the reading of it, it would be better if it was council submit the draft code of meeting practice to the public for exhibition of a period of not less than 42 days.
Thank you for your assistance in that. Appreciate it.
I stepped up considering Councillor Nathan wasn't here to assist us in that space. Councillor McGinley, you had your hand up. Oh, but it was... I'll be about that. Councillor McGinley, were you asking a question around that change?
No, Madam Mayor, Councillor Constable asked for a seconder, and I was simply
saying... Oh, no,
he
doesn't need to. It needs to go to the mover and seconder of the motion for their agreement. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Tate, do you agree to that change?
Look, I guess basically I don't have a problem. I'm just a little bit nervous about changing the language which we use as a standard practice language for these things. That would be my problem, but I can't necessarily see a problem. So what do you reckon, Jack?
Okay, councillors, you have a change in front of you. Are there any questions or debate around the recommendation? Councillor McGinley.
Again, it's probably a question to yourself, Madam Mayor, on procedure. I'd also like to make a change to the recommendation additional to what Councillor Constable has made. I'm just wondering what's the process. Do I say it now or wait until this one is discussed?
This one has been discussed and the change has been made, so you make it now.
Okay, I'd also like to make a recommendation amendment to paragraph 3, where the date 11 June is inserted. I'd like to change that to be the council meeting prior to the 11th of June, which is 28 May. And I'll give you a rationale for that too. I notice that we're deciding today to see whether this code of meeting practice goes out, or draft goes out for public consultation. It won't actually start exhibition for another week. There's 6 weeks for submissions, and then there's a quite long gap of 4 weeks before it comes back to council. And if we go with that 4 weeks, the council meeting, which we'll be discussing, which I believe will be a very lengthy debate, is only going to occur 3 days before the actual deadline for adoption. So I'd much rather bring the council meeting forward to 28 May, giving us 2 lots, 2 attempts to get total agreement before the deadline. That's my rationale. And I believe 2 weeks between the end of submissions and council considering it is adequate time.
Look, we're just checking meeting dates to see if that is doable. Councillor, we've just been looking at timeframes, and I'll get the General Manager to explain, because it is, as you can imagine, quite a complex process.
Through the Mayor, so this would mean it would come off, this would mean the 28th of May council meeting. It would come off exhibition on the 15th of May, which provides staff with basically 3 working days to collate all submissions and write the report to come out on the 21st of May. So considering that this may in fact have quite a few submissions, we think that that's not practical for staff to have basically 3 working days before the report goes back out. And rewriting, if there are changes based on submissions, rewriting the draft, because as you know, it is 63 pages.
Doesn't it come back to our briefing as well?
Could I respond to that, just for the benefit of my fellow councillors? 3 working days, well, if we do it on the 11th of June, and we do agree on a document with, as you say, many substantial changes, that will give them 3 working days to have it ready by the final date. So 3 days at the front end rather than 3 days at the back end. I'd probably bet 3 days at the front end, so we're not going to miss that deadline of 14 June.
Excuse me, Liz. Oh. Liz. Just a question. Yeah. Just a question. When under normal processes, Madam Mayor and General Manager, is that when we get all the submissions together, then those submissions come to council for a briefing, and then we have to have a briefing, and then we have to make sure that they're right to go out for the agenda following week. Is that correct? So it's what we're saying is it's giving councils even less time to assess, because we'll only have basically a day or so to assess all the submissions at the front end, as opposed to having enough time to assess all the submissions ourselves.
If I could respond to Councillor Brown, through you, Madam Mayor. I can't see any problem with why, over a 6-week period, as submissions come in, they can be posted onto the hub and we can read them over a 6-week period as they come in. So we're not hit with 40 or 50 submissions in the last time. We can be reading them as they're coming in. We don't need a briefing, we can just read the submissions.
Councillor, I'm just trying to understand your logic, so, and the timeframes. If, as my understanding, on the 11th of June, considering that there will be, I believe, considerable submissions on this for us to consider, if at that time we cannot reach a decision, it will revert back to the model code. So the Office of Local Government's model code, or interim, getting words from model code of meeting practice, only until such time as we are able to make a decision.
Yes, I understand that's correct. I just think reverting back to, it would only be the mandatory, the black parts, if you like, in there, which will then give us our current code of meeting practice, a interim code of meeting practice, and then a final agreed meeting code of practice. I think it'd be much simpler to go from our current code of practice to a new one rather than have an intermediary stage. Hence my desire to have more time for deliberations of council in a council meeting, and noting that if we can't agree on the 28th of May, we still have as a backup a further council meeting on the 11th of June to revisit it. It gives us 2 bites at the cherry.
Councillor McGinley, I believe that you need to put your amendment, get a seconder, and we'll have some debate around that.
I therefore move the amendment as I enunciated previously to change the date from 11th June 2019 to 28 May 2019 in paragraph 3 of the recommendation.
Do you have a seconder?
Madam Mayor, can I ask a clarification? So with what you're moving, Councillor McGinley, that 42 days is still there. That doesn't diminish the 42 days at all.
Precisely.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a seconder, councillors? Seconded by Councillor Main. Councillors, I'm going to open it up for questions or debate. Now, I'm going to ask for some clarity around this and just what this would mean, because my understanding is that this would only allow staff 3 working days. And I'm not entirely comfortable with that, Councillor McGinley, but I'm going to ask for the General Manager to walk us through what that may look like.
Through the Mayor, so I'll just go through this because it is confusing without having a calendar potentially in front of you. So the 28th of May, that means that the agenda would need to be in the public and with councillors on the 21st of May. The submission time, exhibition time, does not close until the 15th of May, which then means that when it finishes exhibition, and we can't guarantee that submissions will come in during the time. They might all come in, for example, or a lot on the last couple of days. We don't know that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So if it closes on the 15th of May, that gives, and as you would know, our process would be that councillors would receive every submission on a confidential basis, and then staff would need to collate and have a summary or the main issues that came forth from the exhibition period, and would also have a summary of our response. So all of that work would need to go to you for your consideration. That means that staff would really only have the 16th, 17th and then the 20th to do all of that work, and then potentially, because it is, it's my recommendation as a result of public comment, make any changes to the 63-page document as appropriate for your consideration, because you make the decision. So all of that work would have to be done within May the 16th, 17th and 20th, so that it could actually then be public on the 21st of May. So that leaves very limited time for staff to do that work. It also leaves limited time for you as a council, as the decision makers from your code of meeting practice, to absorb those issues, those responses that we would put forward in that brief time. So I hope that clarifies the challenge that would be ahead of us and the councillors if that timeline were to be agreed.
Councillor Constable.
Through you, Madam Mayor, you enunciated something that probably I wasn't completely aware of, and that was, if we fail to decide to make a decision on the code of meeting practice on is it the 13th or 14th of June, then the model code, it becomes our interim code until we actually adopt another one. And so if there is an agreement that is not forthcoming on that 11th of June meeting, it could be addressed at the subsequent, nothing would be precluding it being brought to the subsequent meeting, albeit under the model code with all the black stuff and without the pink and green, yellow stuff.
That's correct. Councillors, are there any further questions? I'm going to put the amendment to you, councillors, so you're clear. So it's the amendment that you're voting on at the moment. Those in favour? Sorry, it's lost. So we now go back to the original motion with the changes that were accepted by the mover and seconder. Councillors, are there any further questions or debate? Councillor McGinley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was being very conscious today while listening to the four speakers who were addressing this issue. Quite a few of them actually got into the content of the draft amendment, so I stayed out of that debate and stayed out of asking questions. As I consider this submission to be primarily not what we think about the contents. However, I do have to make a comment or two, and that is, not only will this be contentious, as we've already seen, even before it goes out for public exhibition, and I know Councillor Tate in his, I won't call it debate, but his discussion with one of the speakers and challenging that speaker to go and do research for us. Councillor Tate mentioned that we seem to be pretty good compared to a lot of other councils. I'll actually second that perception. Again, it's just anecdotal, but going to various other places, other councillors have mentioned that they rather admire our setup. But what this draft does is actually bring us back to the pack. I mean, where we have been actually excelling, and this council does some things pretty well. One of them has been to date the fact that we do have a public access session, which we don't have to have, the fact that we do videotape our public forum, and other people envy us for that. Now, for us to actually have paved the way for a lot of other councils to suddenly go, oops, stop, let's implement something regressive, you know? I hear the phrase going forward a lot. Well, this is just going backward, sorry. To me, it's quite preposterous to throw away something good. I've seen the reasons. I am, like another different speaker, totally unconvinced by the arguments put forward. I foresee this is going to be a very big issue. And certainly at this stage, without having read the submissions, my current thoughts are that I will be putting in a lot of counter-arguments, particularly around Section 3, but also little things that seem to have been lost. Within the red part, which are recommendations rather than not mandatory, there's one simple thing which states that every time a decision is made by council, it's automatically recorded who voted for it and who voted against it. That's not our current practice. To me, it's a good recommendation from our Office of Local Government, but we're knocking that back. So we've been quite selective on the red bits we're going for and the red bits we're going against. And overall, this is regressive. I just think, and getting back away from the contents for a second, thanks for indulging me, but getting to the motion at hand, do we put this out for public submission? When I first read through this, I was almost of the mind that this is so preposterous that I don't think it should even go out there. It's quite embarrassing that we'd ask the public to please give us your comments and us taking away your rights of representation and being heard. But by the same token, by voting to put it out there, and I pick up on Councillor Constable's change, I'm certainly not endorsing the contents, but I am certainly supporting the fact that the public will be given 42 days to make their thoughts known. So thank you. And I will be voting for this for that very reason. I want to hear what they say.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any further questions or debate? Councillor Mayne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'd probably echo some of those comments. Notwithstanding the terrific work that members of our community did a number of years ago, including the likes of Mr Peter Cormack, etc., and this previous council adopted the decision to live stream and included the public forum in that, which I think is to be commended. And as a councillor now in my third year going around the state, this council is indeed lauded for some of those really positive initiatives. We've got a changing media face in the community these days. We know that. We're seeing the demise of some media and the uptake in others. But what's central and consistent in all of that, it's need for councillors, the community, the media to be able to have opportunities to interact. And we know we live in an age demographic. We're one of the oldest shires in the state. We have a lot of people who do tune in, who are unable to get here. And what we're looking to propose now is, instead of continuing to push the boundaries to be a real leader in engagement and transparency with our community, we seem to be taking a step that's shutting down a critical televised interface with our community. And you know what? Sometimes it gets messy, sometimes it gets a bit narky, sometimes it gets a bit awkward. But that's democracy at its heart as well. We get to exchange and people get to listen, to participate and to watch. And I'm really concerned that we as a council are moving ourselves from being a leader and we're taking a backward step. And you've got to go to the first principle. Why would we do this? Yes, we as council are here to make decisions. I think we've made decisions over the last 2.5 years. I don't recall when we haven't. And this argument that says, now and again we get a lot of people come in, be it for Huntfest, RLS or Ross. Geez, that's only 3 examples over 2.5 years, and I think the Huntfest one was under the previous council. It doesn't happen often. So what's broken that we are trying to address? I don't think there is anything broken, but if we're going to do something, we'd have to enhance. How is taking away televising exchange with the community enhancing? And how is then potentially saying, if too many people under democracy want to come and debate, and who knows if they're for or against, I don't know, quite often they're neutral, they're just asking a question. we are handing that responsibility over to our staff. We're elected to hear the voice of our community, not to have staff tell us who will be speaking to us. I think this really is a retrograde step. I'm not of a mind to support this going out to the community because I think it runs a real risk at this stage of sending a really negative message about what this council is representing. I actually think we do need to go back to the drawing board, and some public interface might be helpful. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm going to ask members of the community to please keep your interjections to yourselves. Thank you. I'm going to ask you not to do that. Councillors, if there's no further questions or debate, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Councillor Mayne, was that a vote? I'm sorry. You voted against it? Okay, well, that's fine.